Let me just look into the syllabus and the previous year questions, especially in paper 2 once again. Then I will be looking into the preliminary questions also. In fact, the syllabus says bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India or which are affecting India's interest. So, we are talking about the bilateral issues. So, India and the neighbors and the big powers basically. Then regional and global groupings, various groupings. Now we know the global groupings like UN, anyway we require, we will see the previous year questions also, then we will understand that how UPSC is asking questions from that. Then regional grouping like SAARC, BRICS, ASEAN, in East Asia Summit, a series of regional groups, SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a series of organizations where India is a member. Then effects of policies and politics of the developed and the developing countries on India's interest and the Indian diaspora. So, policies and politics of the developed and the developed, for example, H1B visa issue of US, or in the trade aspects, the various policies of the US, the Donald Trump government's policies on bilateral trade, if they are imposing a tax on India and things, or general tariff agreement. So, a series of policies and politics of the developed and the developing countries, and if for example, a most favored nation status to India by Pakistan, which is not being offered, or India withdrawing it. So, these are policies and politics of the developed and the developing countries. Then important international institutions, agencies and therefore their structure, mandate, etc. Now, just to substantiate what I was talking. See, for example, introduction to India's foreign policy, if you look, it is a question in 2017. Indian diaspora has an important role to play in Southeast Asian countries' economy and society. Appraise the role of Indian diaspora in Southeast Asia in this context. So, the role of Indian diaspora in that region. So, it was a 2017 question. Or a question of India's energy security constitutes the most important part of India's economic progress. So, energy security is an important element. Analyze India's energy policy cooperation with West Asian countries. Again in 2017. See, this is the time when India was trying to deal with UAE. India Prime Minister was visiting, Saudi Arabia. Prime Minister visited Iran. So there was a triangular relationship, like Iran on one side, Saudi Arabia on the other side, UAE, then Israel relations. So everything was linked to the energy security. So that is why this question was asked. See, most of the questions which are asked in the main exam, they are linked to that particular year or something which has happened just before that. So it's very important for us. Then another question: what is meant by Gujarat Doctrine? Does it have any relevance today? Discuss. It was in 2013. See, I am discussing only questions after the change of syllabus. So, if you are looking questions before 2013, most of the questions will be, more questions were asked at that time. But after 13, the questions are more analytical, more difficult to answer. You need a good understanding of the issue, then only you can answer. So, whichever questions I am talking right now, these are questions which are asked after 2013, after the complete remodeling of the syllabus. Similarly, in the Indian Ocean region, a question, Project Mosam. It was very much in news in 2015. So, the question was asked at that time. Project Mosam is considered a unique foreign policy initiative of the Indian government to improve relationship with its neighbors. Does the project have a strategic dimension? Yes, Prime Minister was visiting all the Indian Ocean island countries at that time, whether it is Mauritius, Seychelles, then Maldives he wanted to visit at that time, he could not do at that time because of the problem, internal political problems in Maldives at that time. But Project Mosam was something, using the concept of monsoon, the reversal of the winds and the traders which used to come to India at that time. So, we have a cultural program, a cultural connect program called Project Mosam. And the idea is to counter China in Indian Ocean region. So that is why the question is, does the project have a strategic dimension? Yes, it has a strategic dimension. It is a 2015 question. It is very much in news. Similarly, about ASEAN, evaluate the economic and strategic dimensions of India's Look East policy in the context of the post-Cold War international scenario in 2016. See, Look East policy, today we call it as Act East policy. So, this question, see, economic and strategic dimension, we have a free trade agreement with ASEAN. Now, we are talking about RCEP, the regional, comprehensive economic partnership agreement with ASEAN plus the East Asian countries. So, we have an economic angle, strategic angle is definitely countering China in this region. So, China is a concern for all of us. and China is a concern in Southeast Asia, China is a concern in Indian Ocean region. So, China has this Belt and Road Initiative. So, how to counter the Belt and Road Initiative by China? We have our Look East policy and Act East policy. So, this question was asked in 2016. Similarly, United Nations and India, a lot of questions are asked, especially the various organs which are in news. Like UNESCO was in news last year, so question was asked in 2019. Too little cash, too much politics leaves UNESCO fighting for life. Discuss the statement in the light of US withdrawal and its accusation on the cultural body as being anti-Israel bias. So, this question was very much in news. So, about UNESCO, this question. So, we will have to deal with such institutions like WHO is in news always right now because of the various issues, the pandemic, the corona pandemic and all. WHO is accused of not doing enough, or WHO is accused of not harsh on China. US is accusing so many things. So, there is always a possibility of a question asked on WHO in the current, in the subsequent years. In the next 2-3 years, it can be a question, WHO related issues. Then, what are the key areas of reforms if the WTO has to, WTO, World Trade Organization has to survive? It was in 2018. And in the present context of trade war, especially keeping in mind of the interests of India. So, what are the key areas of reforms if WTO has to survive? 18 question. Then similarly on ECOSOC, United Nations Economic and Social Council, that is one of the principal organs of UN, and explain the different functional commissions attached to it. So, about ECOSOC there was a question 2017, then WTO again in 2016, then there is a question on UNESCO in 2016. Then also discuss the impediments India is facing in its pursuit of a permanent seat in UN Security Council. 2015 question. What are the impediments? What are the roadblocks in India's pursuance or India pursuing a permanent seat in the UN Security Council? This was a question in 2015. So, again in 14 there was a question on WTO. World Bank and IMF was asked in 2013. So, WTO, World Bank, IMF, major, the famous institutions of UN including UNESCO, UNICEF, now WTO, WHO, all are very important. Questions are repeatedly asked and we need to know about that. So, we will be covering all those aspects quite elaborately. Then Indo-US relation is very important, and last year in 2019 there was a question. The question was that what introduces friction into the ties between India and US. What are the causes of friction between India and the US? And in fact, the statement given is what introduces friction into the ties between India and the US is that Washington is still unable to find for India a position in its global strategy which would satisfy India's national self-esteem and ambitions. Basically, the Washington is failing to find a suitable place for India which satisfies India's self-esteem and ambition. So, it is an analytical question. You really need to have an understanding of Indo-US relations, Indo-US nuclear deal, and then why the nuclear deal has not been finally successful commercially, and the H-1B visa issue, the trade related issues. So, and why, and we are also concerned about the US is not able to help us in getting a seat in the NSG, the nuclear supplier group. China is opposing and we are not able to move forward. So, there are multiple issues involved in it. So, this question says that right now the friction between India and US is mainly because we have great expectation from US. US is not able to accommodate India in their scheme of things the way we want. That is what we are asked to analyze and give examples for that. 2019 question, very interesting question. Deeper understanding, wider knowledge is required, then only we will be able to answer this. Similarly, India and China. China is using its economic relations and positive trade surplus as a tool to develop potential military power status in Asia. In this light, in the light of this statement, discuss its impact on India and her neighbors. See, China is trying to improve its relationship with Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, then entire Southeast Asia, Pakistan of course I said. So, the Belt and Road Initiative, then in Central Asia. So, everywhere China is trying to use its economic relation and positive trade to convert into a mighty power, a muscle power of Asia. This is a question, and in light of this, the impact on India and her neighbors. So, again a broad question, analytical question. Then in about China again, what do you understand with string of pearls? It is 2013 question. So it is a policy by China to encircle India, and how India is trying to counter it, and briefly outline the steps taken by India to counter it. So it is a 13 question. So India and China. Then similarly, India and Pakistan about the increasing cross-border terrorism and relation to SARC. Then about terrorism, twice it was asked, one in 2016, another in 2015. Then India, Japan, twice in the last 4 or 5 years questions were there. India, Israel, Central Asia and India. So we have questions from all around. So my point here is we have to have a deeper and good understanding, and these questions is available, and in a PDF form also I am providing it, and you can just look into this question, then you will understand how I will not say difficult, but you need to have good understanding. Similarly, in the preliminary exam, we have a series of questions, and in 19 the questions were very less. Only one question, something related to international issues came, but in 18, 7-8 questions were there. One was on general data protection regulation in Europe, a question was asked. And where was this general data protection was there. Similarly, an action plan for prioritization and implementation of cooperation areas in nuclear field. We have signed an agreement with Russia. That question, with which country India has signed this agreement? It was with Russia, this question was there. And similarly, additional protocol in International Atomic Energy Agency, India signed after the Indo-US nuclear deal for inspection in India. So that question was asked again in 18. Similarly, what are the consequences or the consequences of a country becoming a member of nuclear supplier group? This is very much in news in 2018. So very simple, straightforward. If you know about nuclear supplier group, we could have easily answered. Then similarly, the rule of law index, that is a slightly offbeat question. But another question, which of the following pairs of regions sometimes mentioned in news? Catalonia in Spain, Crimea, when the option was given, Mindanao in Philippines, the Oromia, in Sudan region. So, but the question is, you are just asked to balance it. Which are the following are correctly matched? So, if you have heard about these issues at that time, you can easily answer that question. Similarly, very recently in the following countries, lakhs of people either suffered from severe famine or acute malnutrition or died due to starvation caused by war, ethnic conflicts, etc. So, it was again in news at that time. So, international issues in news at that time, Yemen, South Sudan and all were the answer. So, it would have been answered provided there is an understanding of international issues and bilateral issues. Then two-state solution in the context of Israel, which is always in news. Now, the question was that the term two-state solution is sometimes mentioned in the news in the context of affairs of which country. So, it is about Israel. Similarly, consider the following pairs of towns sometimes mentioned in the news and the country. Aleppo in Syria, Kirkuk in Iraq, but it is wrongly given. Mosul in Iraq again. Then Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan. So, question was asked, you have to find out which is the correct pair. Again, all these are a part of the international issues and conflicts which are there right now. So, every year what I am trying to tell you is that 4 to 5 questions can easily be expected from international bilateral institutions and the events which are happening around the world. So, this is a very important area. In essay you can expect 1 question. In main exam, in paper 2, you can expect 5 to 6 questions or 4 to 6 questions, we can say anywhere between 50 marks to 75 marks, and in preliminary on an average 5 questions. So, 125 marks in essay, 50 to 75 marks in main exam in paper 2, and preliminary a minimum of or an average of 5 questions in preliminary. That is what you can expect from doing a thorough or studying international bilateral issues thoroughly. So, I personally feel it's a very exciting area, very interesting. Newspaper reading makes more meaningful to you, why various countries are doing what. So, these I am trying to give a background story also. So, it will help you in your understanding of the international issues much better and clearer, which will be a major boost for your civil service preparation. So,